Oliver, Oliver. Yeah. Consider yourself at home. Consider yourself part of the family. I've taken to you so strong. It's clear we're going to get along. Hey everyone, it's Stephanie and Oliver, and welcome back to my channel. So today I have my second installment in Project Dickens, which is where I am reading every Dickens book in chronological order, and today we are doing Oliver Twist. And how appropriate to have my little girl Oliver here, since that's who she was named after. Story time. I found Oliver when I was working in a grocery store. I found her under a pallet outside, and I thought she was a boy, so I named her Oliver after Oliver Twist. And then she got pregnant, and we quickly learned that she was a girl. But yes, she's so cute. Did you like the book? Yeah. Do you like the musical? Yeah. So I sing Oliver to her a lot. So this is Dickens' second published novel. This is my life now. You know? And it was originally published under his pseudonym Boz, and it was published serially from 1837 to 1839. His goal was to realistically depict the impoverished London underworld, and Dickens wanted to illustrate his belief that poverty leads to crime, which I thought was super interesting. So this novel follows Oliver Twist, and Oliver has been an orphan since birth. His mother died in childbirth, and he ends up in a workhouse because we don't know who his father is, and so it was pretty much the only place he can go. And while he's there, he really is not well loved by the beadle or the staff at this workhouse. He's a little angel child, and they just do not like him. So after the infamous more scene with the gruel, which if you've seen the musical, top tier, he is sent to work as an apprentice for an undertaker. And after an event there and suffering mistreatment, he escapes and runs away and heads for London. While he's in London, he finds himself in the presence of Jack Dawkins, otherwise known as the Artful Dodger. And the Artful Dodger invites him to stay at the house of an old gentleman who is Fagin. And we learn that Artful Dodger is one of a few boys who are trained to be pickpockets for Fagin. The shenanigans and things ensue from there. So, this was a reread for me. I read Oliver Twist many moons ago. I think when I was in high school, and I remember really liking it. This is one of the instances where I saw the adaptation before I had actually read the book. I grew up watching the Oliver musical, which is so good if you haven't seen it, even though it does deviate from the book, obviously. This is definitely a large tone shift from the Pickwick Papers, and it's really interesting going from something that's just so fun and hilarious to something that is so heart-wrenching and somber, which I think is another reason why reading his books in chronological order is a fun project for me. I definitely would not recommend this as an introduction book. I feel like some of his more popular books, like Great Expectations, David Copperfield, those are probably more realistic entry points to Dickens. This one does have some flaws. So one of the biggest cons for me for this book is it does get a bit repetitive in that Dickens has this way in this book of using the same descriptors or catchphrases or things like that for each character. So it makes it feel like they're kind of tied down and stuck in this little box and doesn't really provide much room or opportunity for character growth or extensive character development. I feel like a lot of the characters in this book are either really good or really bad. There's not a ton of nuanced characters, if that makes sense. I mean, you still know who, the bad guys are, but there's not a lot of shades of gray. This book also made me really angry for two reasons. One is because, which was the intent, seeing how these poor children were just being mistreated and abused and basically starved in these workhouses, which I know is something that Dickens wanted to bring to light, and I appreciate that. So I was getting angry on behalf of these children because you want to do something about it and you can't. You just have to go with it with these characters, and especially since Oliver is such a sweet child, and to see him so horribly mistreated is just so heart-wrenching. And there were times when I definitely had to put the book down so I could give myself a minute. So I feel like it was an accurate portrayal for that time of how these kids were treated. And it's very enlightening, but it made me angry because of that. The other reason that it made me angry was I know that this book was written in the 1800s and the thought process was a little different then, and people who were different, the other, were not accepted. And normally in a book, it's easier for me to read it in the context of the time versus something that was written last year when we obviously know way better now. But in this book, Fagin is Jewish, and he's portrayed where Jewishness is viewed as evil. So it's hard to explain. It's not that he's an evil person who just happens to be Jewish. I feel like it comes across as Jewishness equals evil. But interestingly enough, while I was doing a little bit of research to remind myself of some things for this video, I learned that because this was serialized, somebody read the first part of the book and actually wrote to Charles Dickens. So there was, in 1863, a Jewish mother of 10 named Eliza Davis wrote a letter to Charles Dickens to berate him about his portrayal of Fagin. So this author had actually bought Dickens's London home, and she wrote to him to request funds for a Jewish home for convalescents, adding that perhaps a donation could right some of the wrongs that he's done. And the interesting part that she wrote, it says, Charles Dickens, the large-hearted, whose works plead so eloquently and so nobly for the repressed of his country, has encouraged a vile prejudice against the despised Hebrew. Fagin, I fear, admits only of one interpretation, but while Charles Dickens lives, the author can justify himself or atone for a great wrong. Fagin is written to be terrifying, which I don't... He's written as ugly, and he's hundreds of times referred to as the Jew, which is so so infuriating. But the result was, in a later book, Dickens wrote a Jewish character in a positive light, but he also tried to edit out a lot of the Jewish references in reprints of Oliver Twist. And I think Fagin is kind of, his evilness is toned down toward the latter end of the serialized version of the book. But I had no idea that that actually happened, so I just thought that was super interesting. That while he was in the process of writing this, someone called him on his horrible depiction of this character, called him out on it, and things changed a bit. I think, despite the horrible things with Fagin, the other characters, there were some really good ones. I did like Bill Sikes as a villain. I think he's absolutely terrifying, and I feel like he was written really well as a villain, and the adaptation does a really good job of portraying Bill Sikes. Also, I really like Monks as a character. I do not like him as a person at all. Monks is working with Fagin to get Oliver back when he escapes one time, and then it turns out that there's a reason for this. And Monks is left out in, I think, every single Oliver Twist adaptation I've ever seen. And I don't know why, because it's interesting. And the whole reason for it and how it ties in with the plot is just fascinating. I also really like the Artful Dodger. Number one, love his name. And I like that he befriends Oliver. And their friendship was an interesting dynamic in the story. My favorite character is not Oliver Twist. My favorite character is Nancy. She is Bill Sikes' girlfriend, to put it in modern day terms. I really like Nancy because she brings nuance into this book. Oliver is very angelic and good, and Bill Sikes is really evil. Fagin does some horrible stuff. And then you have Nancy, who's kind of caught in the middle of everything. She's condemned by society for her life choices. And she lives with Bill Sikes, and she knows that he's not really a good guy, but she loves him, and she's caught between that. She's a very good morally ambiguous character, I feel like. And her relationship with Bill Sikes, it leads her to commit some criminal acts for his sake, but then she's also caught between her love for Bill Sikes and wanting to make him happy, and then her love for Oliver and wanting to do what's best for him. And I don't want to spoil anything, but just there are some things that happen because of that, and it just makes the big event that happens with her just made me really love her as a character. I also think it's really interesting, the portrayal of how charity has failed in Victorian England in this book. The system was put in place to help the poor, so to speak, but really it just kind of enslaved them to keep them in poverty and strip them of their rights and just put them into hard labor, which I think is something that is still very much relevant to this day, even if it's not executed in such an in-your-face way, if that makes sense. So it's definitely good food for thought. The one thing I don't think is super realistic is, or one of my cons for this book is, he really idealizes the countryside. And, you know, if you can just get away from the country, or get away from the city, you know, it's just a whole new world, and, you know, not everything is perfect no matter where you live. And also the ending, I felt like, even though there's a scene where things happen and there are consequences, I feel like the ending, it was too neat of a bow tied. But I did appreciate how it ended, and I feel like even though this book is very grim, and then you start having some happier times, and then all of a sudden, you know, something happens and you're pulled right back into the grimness, there is some hope. There are some characters that give you hope, and even though this isn't my favorite Dickens, it's definitely one that I feel like provides great context for discussion, and discussion about how society has grown or how society has failed its citizens, and, you know, all sorts of things like that. So I feel like this wasn't a super coherent or cohesive review. I feel like for me, this is more of a middle of the road Dickens. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. There are some things that I appreciated, and some things which I wish he had not done. But overall, I do recommend this. I think Oliver Twist is so saturated in our society now. I feel like you get a lot more out of the book than you would in adaptation, obviously, but especially in this one, since they leave out things in the adaptations that are in the book. But yeah, hopefully this review made sense. If you've read this, who is your favorite character? What did you think? Did you like the book? Did you hate it? Let me know down below. You know, definitely give a thumbs up for Oliver and her cameo earlier. You know, gotta get the likes for the cats. If you want to leave an emoji, drop a heart emoji down below. As always, if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and click the subscribe button if you'd like. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.